an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, good morning. Here we go. Tuesday, April the 11th. Bit of a special edition of Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Welcome in. I'm Dave Trafford. We're in your feed Monday to Thursday with Now and Next. Touching on the stories that we think have a immediate and a longer term effect on how you do your business, how you go about your business, things that affect your family, your future, your retirement, your new family, whatever it might be. If you've got a story that you think we should be checking up on, by all means, reach out. You can find me on the social medias at Dave Trafford. And that's the handle on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And if you want to offer an idea, comment, feedback, whatever it might be, happy to entertain it. Today and tomorrow, though, I kind of want to peel the curtain back a little bit, just to kind of get a sense of where we are as far as the media is concerned these days. I was just reviewing some stats that were developed and curated by the folks at Harvard University. And it's pretty interesting stuff when you start to look at Canadian media ownership and the future of media, certainly in this country, but right across North America. And I thought it was kind of fascinating and really sort of informative to see how and where Canadians are consuming their media, where we actually get our news specifically as we talk about this. And it looks like, the CBC going away is the number one source for Canadians in terms of consuming news and information. And I guess considering that we put $1 billion+ into it every year, that's probably good that it's at least, we know it's being used. 25.273 million impressions or visits, unique monthly views is how they call it. That's a lot. That's pretty significant. And it puts the CBC up in the top 50 in terms of the size of media companies internationally. Interesting, though, to see that MSN News is the second one. CTV third. Then we skip down to Yahoo and BuzzFeed. Global News makes the top 5. So, you have to get to 6 before you get to Rogers Media. And then Post Media Network is in there in the 6th spot, I guess. And it's got an incredible reach just because it owns all these small town newspapers, many of which have gone digital. Now, and the degree to which it stands out in that list is remarkable because that's all media. So that would include all the television and the radio and so on. But if you just take it into account for the most digital news that's consumed, CBC, CTV, Post Media, 1, 2, 3 in this country. What I find is remarkable, really remarkable, is that there's got to be a list of 25 here, and they've just limited it because it's the size of a graph. Global News does not appear on that list. It doesn't make the top 25 locations where Canadians consume digital news. BlogTO is ahead of it. Narcity Media is ahead of it. Insider.inc is ahead of it. Doesn't even make the list. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to really nerd out on this stuff. But it's kind of an interesting view of the landscape here in this country. What I also found interesting is that they have collated and collected information around the media outlets that are getting funding. And now it's undisclosed. We don't know how much funding they get, but they get funding from the Google News Showcase. So Globe and Mail, Torstar, Le Devoir, Village Media, Black Press Media, Salt Wire Network, Winnipeg Free Press. There's a whole bunch of them here that get some kind of payment from Google News Showcase. And the idea there is they're getting paid because they're putting their stories up on Google and it's part of this Google News Showcase. So, and it flies in the face of the arguments that are being made right now in Ottawa around whether or not Google should be paying for any and all links, whether they put them up there or not. But it's a pretty interesting thing. So I'll put the link in the show notes for you if you're really interested in digging in and taking a look at who owns it, the kind of money that they're spending in terms of revenues, and the kind of visits that they have, unique views that they get on their various platforms. It's pretty interesting stuff. It leads me to an online conversation I got into on the weekend because I noticed that a number of people were talking about the NAB conference that's coming up in Las Vegas, National Association of Broadcasters in the U.S., and it's the big one, right? And everybody excited because for the most part, this is the first one where COVID isn't hanging over our head the way it was for the last 3 years. And that's good news. We'll take that. And I'm always interested to see who's popping up and showing up, who's going to be presenting and so on. And one of these days, Aaron and I'll smarten up and head to Las Vegas and sit in on that conference. Because I think there's real value in face-to-face, hallway networking, all those things that you learn when you go to these conferences, right? And the virtual stuff is okay, but at the same time, there is a real value in making eye contact with people, I think. So I think, needless to say, that's what people are excited about, getting back to business. We did that with PodCamp Toronto. We're getting ready to go to Radio Days North America. It's part of the Canadian Music Week festivities to be held here in Toronto in June. So we're engaging in that one-on-one, in-person stuff. But as I was watching what was going on with the NAB, there's a fellow by the name of Fred Jacobs. If you're in the media, you'll probably know the name. But Fred is, a veteran in the communications field, certainly in media. He has been involved in television and radio, but particularly he's a radio guy who, likes to look at it from the perspective of, I'm all in support of radio, but it's got to be better in terms of, making the best use of its capabilities. And he posted a piece called Running Out the Clock. Quote, radio pros running out the clock are not serving the industry or the next generation of broadcasters well. And he's calling on the industry to encourage and embrace, some of the brilliance and the creativity that comes from youthful enthusiasm. I don't know, depending on your age, that might be where you are right now. But at some point, youthful enthusiasm drove you to whatever passion project, whatever career, whatever field of study it might have been. There was that level of enthusiasm. Remember that? And now, he's not suggesting that the old dogs like me, that we're not welcome. But the point is, if you are a veteran in the industry, and I think this applies to any industry, and you're not bringing that enthusiasm and energy every day, well, get the hell out of the way. because there's somebody there behind you who's younger and hungrier and want to take an innovative crack at improving the mousetrap. And generally, I would agree with them. I mean, I started my career at a startup. For those of you who've been listening for some time, you'll know that I was among a group of 20-somethings who applied for and launched an FM station at the University of Toronto back in the 80s. No shortage of brilliant programming ideas. We just had absolutely no idea how to run a business. I mean, we made every mistake possible. Yet, here it is, all these years later, the station still survived in spite of us. And now I'm just wrapping up year number 40 in my radio career. Still doing regular commentary on News Talk 1010 in Toronto, but if you're a regular listener here, you'll also know that I'm 2 years into a new startup with Aaron. Aaron and I founded our small but mighty podcast network, Story Studio Network, this month, 2 years ago. Yeah, 2021, April. All started with a text message to Aaron. You got a minute for a quick call. She loves telling that story. And here we are 2 years later. I mean, we're working with some really bright and creative, award-winning 30 and 40-somethings. We've got a couple of 20-somethings who are still in school and excited about engaging audiences, working their craft. And every day they bring a collective A game to the table. They always do. And the energy is extraordinary. Here's what's interesting. Almost all of the people who work on the production side have left radio, and they work with us now. I mean, they didn't have the luxury of running out the clock. The clock ran out on them. And quite frankly, I mean, all due respect to Fred and his enthusiasm for youthful enthusiasm, the current state of the radio industry, period, Canada, U.S., it's just not built to generate, never mind encourage or accept any of these brilliant new innovative ideas. Like I said, I've been doing this a while. So, spent time in the talk show host chair. I've been a beat reporter. I've been an international reporter. I'm a recovering news director. Yeah, I've done a thing or two in this industry. And I'm not meaning to come off sounding bitter. These are observations based on my experience. And I'm going to tell you that innovation, creativity, and the fun, that's why I got into it. It was fun. They all diminish and they weaken the farther the decision makers are from the control room or the newsroom. Plug it in there where the rubber really hits the road, where you make the sound of shit happening, as my friend Dave Sprague used to say. Particularly in radio, most markets, most day parts, decision makers aren't even in the same city as a control room or a newsroom, if there's a newsroom. And it's not unusual that the control room would be empty because of syndication and automation. They just rack up a show and fire it out of wherever, and it bounces across the country. Now, people say, do you miss the radio days? Yeah, I do. I don't miss getting up at 3 a.m, but I miss that interest. There's a real interesting energy and vibe around the contact with the audience that you have when you're live on the radio. It's a different audience than you, the podcast listener. Not that I'm not enjoying this. I mean, I've chosen this over the radio. I stepped away from the radio to do this. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at it and say, I miss the old days. Who doesn't miss old days? But I got to tell you, I'm invigorated by the Story Studio Network team's startup spirit, and they've got it. And I'm thriving thanks to their youthful enthusiasm. So today will be part of that because we are engaging in day one of our event called Ready to Record. And we've got some really motivated folks, I dare say some youthful enthusiasm in the group. And they're all excited about taking their idea to a plan to a podcast and using it to promote their business, to promote their thought leadership, whatever it might be. And there are all kinds of good reasons to be doing that if you're a brand or you're a thought leader. So maybe we'll get into some of that tomorrow because there's some really interesting stats. You want to riff a little bit more on the state of media and where it's going and where radio really is relative to the rest of media, where television really is relative to the rest of media. Now, if you want to go back and look at that Harvard report, some pretty impressive numbers when you talk about unique visits or unique views. It's fairly healthy, but I got news for you. That doesn't take into account the analog over-the-air version of broadcast anymore. It's just, it's fading. And the industry in and of itself is not prepared for the change. In fact, it has done little to prepare for the change. Caught, sort of on its back foot all the time. And I don't say that to be negative or bitter. I'm saying that there needs to be, and there are ways for these young, enthusiastic, brilliant, innovative, creative brains to bring their A game to the media. So anyway, that we'll get into that a little bit more tomorrow. So, and I'll be able to report back on just how well day one of Ready to Record went through Story Studio Network. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.